Hey, good morning. This is Tech Mornings with the Tech Prepper, Episode 5, Deploying Peregrine to Google Kubernetes Engine, Part 1. Before we get started, let's ask ourselves the obvious question. Why Kubernetes and why GKE? This is actually a personal preference for me. I have spent quite a bit of time in the past with AWS, and this is an opportunity for me to play with another cloud provider. If there is interest, I'm happy to do a video, but I need your help. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if you actually want to see a video for the same process, but on AWS. All right, in terms of what we're actually going to do today, we're going to start by installing CoopControl or CoopControl. This is a command line utility that allows us to interact locally with a remote or even local Kubernetes cluster. Next, we're going to create a Google Cloud Platform account. And Google, as it stands today, has a $300 credit over the course of 12 months that you can use to test the platform for free. And the way that I'm planning on deploying my stack, I'm almost positive that I can run at least 10 to 12 months using those $300 free credits. Next, we'll create a GCP project. In our case, I'm going to call mine the Tech Prepper. And before we do anything else at this point, I want to make sure that I don't exceed my monthly budget. Google does provide a cost calculator, so we'll go into how to pick the appropriate resources within GCP to stay within that budget. Next, we'll create our first GKE cluster, and at this point, we'll stop the video as there are other activities we need to do, and we'll reserve those for part 2. Let's start by installing CoopControl or CoopControl. And this is the command we'll be using to manage our Kubernetes cluster on GKE. It also works for any other type of cluster deployment. There are a variety of platform installation methods. Since I'm on a Mac, I'll use those. And for Mac, there are a couple of options. One is to download the binary with curl, and there's one for homebrew. I'm going to go ahead and use the binary install with curl, but I also do have homebrew, so that would have been an option to me as well. So we'll start by opening up a terminal window, and in my case, I do have a local bin directory that I like to have in my path, so that's where I will pull kubectl and install it. And then I'll change the permissions to make it executable. And there's an option to verify our installation just by looking at the version. It's a little bit different than the standard Unix convention, but it'll work. So we'll do kubectl version, and then we'll test the version of the client. And as you can see there, we have the latest version, and we can also show that I have the one that is in my home directory. Perfect. All right, at this point, we should now have the prerequisites to start with the Google Cloud installation. Okay, the first thing we have to do is set up a Google Cloud Platform account. And all I did was search for GCP on Google, and the first link will take you to the GCP homepage. If you're not logged in already or don't already have an account, I believe you should see a page that looks something like this, and it may say go to console, I can't remember anymore. Click through, and all you need to fill out for the GCP account is whether you're an individual or a business, your address, and then you do have to provide Google with a credit card. And I have just recently done this for my account, and as you can see, you're going to get a $300 credit to use over the course of 12 months. Now that we have a Google Cloud Platform account, let's create a new project. And I'm going to call my new project the Tech Prepper. And it's creating a project for us. Now that we have our GCP project ready to go, let's talk about Kubernetes sizing. For our particular use case, I need 3 pods. The first pod is Peregrine, and that will be a stateful pod, and it'll be backed by a persistent volume and persistent volume claim, and I think I should be able to be okay with 50 gigabytes of storage. The other 2 pods are going to be stateless, pods, and they will be for Apache. One to serve the live traffic for the domain, and a second one for staging, and that will be the primary way that I log in and manage content in Peregrine. Google provides an excellent calculator called GCP Calculator, and it'll allow you to estimate your monthly spend. From there, navigate to Kubernetes Engine, and in our case, we're looking into one node, and the N1 standard one type looks like it'll meet our needs. It has one virtual CPU and 3.75 gigabytes of RAM. The only other change I'm going to make to this is to make sure that it is in the Western region, and we'll add that to our estimate. So $24.27 USD is what we're looking at per month, and that'll work nicely with our $300 we have in terms of GCP credit for the year. Since I will be backing the Peregrine pod with a persistent volume and persistent volume claim, I would like to also get some storage added to the estimate. So I'm going to look for something that's in the same region again, Oregon, US, West 1. And for me, I'm fine with 50 gigabytes. As you can see, that only runs $2. So I'm looking at an estimated monthly bill of $26.27 to run the 3-pod Kubernetes stack for the techprepper.com. If you want more information on the instance types, you can go to Google, search for GCP machine types. And Google has an excellent article describing all of the machine types along with their pros, cons, and I believe pricing information. Now it's time to go ahead and create our first GKE cluster in GCP. There is a hamburger menu on the left, and once you're in your GCP account, just select Kubernetes Engine. From here, we can create our first cluster. And I will call my cluster the Tech Prepper #1, and I do like to version these, as I do tend to increment or create other test clusters in sequence. Just like before, we're going to go ahead and use a zonal region and use one that is in the West Coast. And the dashboard has changed in probably the last 6 months. Do not click Create at this point, otherwise it will spin up a 3-node cluster. They have removed settings below the fold here. Instead, in the left-hand side, you have to go to Default Pool and configure this. In my case, I'm going to leave Default Pool as is, as well as the GKE version, but I will change the number of nodes to 1 node. And I think I'm going to keep the defaults as is, and I'll just experiment with those over time. Next, let's click on nodes. And as I mentioned in the sizing video, that I'm going to go with the N1 series, and we're going to use the N1 standard -1 machine type. And this will give us that roughly $24 spend. We'll use a standard boot disk, and I believe this is all we need here. The persistent volume and the persistent volume claim, that additional 50 gigabytes of storage, will not be created here manually. We're going to use a tool that's part of the Kubernetes ecosystem called Helm. We'll do that in another video, and it will be responsible for using the Google Cloud APIs and Kubernetes to request a volume from Google. At this point, I'm going to quickly go see if there's anything under security that I need, metadata, and that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, this is just for my personal use right now. In a perfect DevOps world, I would have a strategy around labeling the pods so that I could designate them or label the resources in GCP so that I could distinguish different environment types and things of that nature. Again, this is just for me to quickly create an environment. We will refine this over time in the coming weeks. So at this point, let's click Create. And this may take some time. The cluster took a few minutes to set up, but now we're ready to deploy to our cluster. This was more information than I had anticipated for this video. So this will be the end. We'll call this part 1, and we'll have part 2 the day after next. And in that video, we'll take off where we left here, and we'll start by installing Google Cloud SDK. This will provide us with the G-Cloud command line program, and we can use that to interact with our Kubernetes cluster from our local machines. Then we'll install Helm and Tiller in our Kubernetes environment, and then conclude by deploying Peregrine and our 2 Apache instances using Helm, and we should be able to see our site live. I may even add some bonus material and set up the Google Cloud load balancer so that we can actually terminate my domain via SSL. So that I may have to do a part 3. I haven't quite decided yet on how far we get. At any rate, guys, thanks for tuning in. And if you do like the content that's being produced on this channel for the tech series, please make sure to comment, subscribe, and give a thumbs up. Those are the only signals I have to make sure that there's value in this content. At any rate, be strong, be safe, and let's start using GKE with Peregrine.